Hey, welcome to Overtime, where we take Sunday's message further. My name is Jeremy, and I'm your host. And this is a podcast where we just want to ask the questions that we think that you would ask as it relates to Sunday's message. And as we do so, we hope that it helps you grow in your life and your faith. With that being said, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of the podcasts that are coming out. Not only that, hit the like button, because when you do so, it helps us help other people. And if you ever have a question about Sunday's content or about Overtime, you can submit those to overtime@npaustin.com, and we will be sure to get to those in future podcasts. So with that being said, here's a quick recap of Sunday, and then we're going to jump into our conversation today.
Well, today we are in part 3 of the series called You Are Here. Now, I remember when I took this big step between trail marker 2 and 3. It was Saturday, July 29th of 2000, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I just said, babe, we got to go figure this out. Trail marker number 3 is this idea of I'm following Jesus. We were convinced that Jesus is the only way to live. The question is, how do you know if you're in trail marker number 3? I think one of the things it would say is that Jesus is better. The other way that you know you're here is that you're known publicly and privately as a follower of Christ. And last of all, certainly not least, there's a lot of, but you're here when your worldview changes. The worldview is origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. As you spend time here, there's going to be a tension. It's like this spiritual treadmill. Is this all there is? And if you've ever felt that, experienced that, I think that's wonderful. Because it's the time, it's the season, you are on the cusp of moving to something even more wonderful and greater than trail marker.
So people see you a lot on Sundays, on stage, and, we've been to Red Horn multiple times and bumped into Northpoint, as we call that the second Northpoint office, right?
Right.
And I think people know you from stage, but not a lot of people know you when you're not on stage singing on a Sunday. And I think you have a life outside of not singing on stage on Sunday, right?
Yeah.
So what do you do when you're not singing on Sunday? Like, what does Jayme Ivison's life look like currently?
Yeah, for me, no day is ever the same. That's exciting and can be sort of daunting or stressful at times, just to not exactly know. Every day of my life, almost every single day, without exaggerating, I do something that I haven't done before. So I'm into creative media. I have, over the years of supporting a family while being a musician, I started doing creative media work. So kind of all things in that, with graphic, sitting at a computer usually, or behind a camera, taking photos, that kind of thing. And ultimately that gravitated into brand consulting, which is the culmination of all that. And the beautiful thing is, being a songwriter all my life, it turns out brand consulting is a lot like songwriting. It's so similar in terms of the problem solving. So it's all a different form of like really beautiful math. I studied civil engineering in college. Oddly enough, never used it, but
Yeah, I don't think people would believe you.
yeah. And I don't know why I enjoyed that. It did identify with something, and later I find out oh yeah, math and music have a really unique relationship together, because it's problem solving.
Yeah.
And songwriting, because it's ultimately that's what's happening. Whether it's an internal problem or external, the artist is trying to find a way to put that into tangible form. Just something that's abstract, and bring it into a way people can experience it, can be part of it through a song or painting. So anyway, I do that a lot, and then I have a pretty big family dynamic. There's a lot going on in my family, so it's always something. Something. Week by week, I don't know how, it's always surprising. So I'm busy with that. And then just being an artist is a really interesting and fun ride. It's not real easy to be in a world that, isn't built that way, isn't built for flowing like that, and to flow. So a lot of times, you might feel like this is wrong, to move about this way, to flow and to wait, but then you see the result of that. You see what comes from being patient with it and letting the whole thing land on you, kind of like a butterfly. You cannot force a butterfly to land on you. But pretty amazing when it does, and you're experiencing something that close. So I do that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm doing that with my time and my days. And, you know, hoping to find some bit of organized schedule to it all, but it's a crazy flow. And I have to say that having an organic flow to serving is also actually, you're just asking about my week, and I just have to admit, like, you know, it's one of those deals kind of like a budget, and you forget to accommodate for this one thing. You go, turns out I'm actually doing that every day.
Yeah.
And if I don't think about the serving aspect, it's just deep inside of me. It's kind of, I was wired for it. And so that knock comes, and it's just good or bad, or I mean, I'm not saying it's a great thing, but it's definitely something that my time has to be accounting for. Like, that's going to happen, and then I'm going to say, what happened to Tuesday? And be like, well, this friend.
Well, man, it's funny you say all that, because, you know, being on the other side of you, I've known you for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, and I'm realizing as we're like starting this podcast, I've never asked you these questions before. I think just the answers have come up in conversation over the years, but I've never been like, Jayme, you know, what are your musical inspirations? You know, like, but I think I know a lot of them over the years. But I think that's part of the reason why we wanted you on this podcast. This past week, I had a privilege to go hear Bob Goff speak, and he was here in town at a conference. It was like 100 people, and we got, you know, some Northpoint staffers got free tickets, and that was really cool. But one of the things he said is his whole point of his message, or whatever he does, I don't know if you could call it a message, but was be where your feet are. And I've heard you say that. Have you said that before verbatim? Is that like one of your life principles?
See that I've read Bob Goff, but I didn't know he said that. And,
that's like one of his things.
So that's what happens to me. I say I do everything the hard way. Like, it's in a book already, but I have to wait until I find it and figure it out. But you know, mine is a little different, and it's what I use with my kids.
I've heard you. Yeah. What is your version? Since
like 6th grade or 5th grade, maybe is when it started. Is just be where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, that's cool. You know, that whole, you know, as Bob's talking, and all the conversations you and I have had, hours and hours of conversations over the years. You know, when he said "be where your feet are," I instantly thought of you.
Wow.
Because, you know, I don't know how you do it, and you get stuff done, because it feels like when we hang out, it's like, man, we had 2 hours of great conversation. I feel like I robbed your day. You know what I mean? And then you talk about, you know, this guy coming from Florida from like 10 years ago, and, you know, something was going on, and you're like, yeah, well, I just dropped everything, and I just was with him like for the week. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things I really respect about you, and also just one of the things why we want to do on this podcast for this particular topic, because we're talking about not doing, but being. You know, and as it relates to faith, and you are somebody that I've been on the other side and watched you just be over and over and over again. So, thanks for having the conversation and being on the podcast. I want to get more into that, but I also know that there's a general population of people at Northpoint that still want to get to know you a little bit more. When you talk about branding, are there any recognizable brands that you can say that you were a part of, or people would recognize or know?
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest one, although they currently, I mean, they're still around Cedar Park. They are in between of having a Cedar Park location, but probably the biggest brand is Shine. It's the truck. And most people from around here say, oh, I thought it was Shiner. You know,
yeah.
They thought it was the
most
beer.
Texans.
But the red trucks, and I mean, there's some other things around town. A big preschool, what else? Oh, a big venue, a cool new venue in downtown Round Rock called Centro, and there's 3 companies in there, and I got to be part of the brand development on all of those, and architect firm downtown, and
just a hodgepodge of
just,
like all sorts of different things.
Yeah, all around.
Yeah, well, I knew the Shine one, because we know we'd been connected through Shine in a number of ways, but I didn't know architecture firm, preschool. You know, that's a broad range of things you've gotten to be a part of.
Yeah, once I did the UI development on a thing. It was for a company doing UI installation, but it was actually going to be used by Starbucks. So I was so hopeful that I could say, "Oh yeah, me and Starbucks have a thing." You know, like yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
You know, but then you look a little deeper, and you don't get to do that. Yeah. You don't get to say that.
Yeah. Who gets to say that?
The rules are pretty strict, but no.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, how did you, branding, all that stuff, how'd you end up singing on stage at churches?
Oh, wow.
I know that's a broad question, but where did it all start musically, and then how did it become, within the church?
Yeah. Honestly, it was becoming a follower of Christ. I had two phases to my faith. Very distinct ones, kind of like I have two very distinct phases in songwriting. But in faith, I understood salvation. Like I fully understood what it was about. I understood that I was in need of that. Like I understood why Jesus was different than this faith was different than the others.
How did you understand that? You grow up in church?
I grew up, yes, I did in a way. I grew up in a system that was basically Catholic in terms of its, stand up, sit down, that kind of thing. I never heard anything about a relationship with God until my older sister started attending a different church in town with some of her friends. And then I saw her, like, spending time with her Bible and that kind of thing, and it was just curious. But what I grew up in wasn't like a connection point or anything like that. So I went away with my sister to an event, and that's where it all clicked and I understood it. I mean, I had been living, I lived kind of a wild life early. I was, a guitar player since like 5 years old. So by the time I was in 6th grade, I was already getting into a band, and then 7th grade, we're playing all the parties because all of my bandmates were 18 and 19.
Oh, wow.
So I did what they did.
In 7th grade.
In 7th grade, yeah. And so anyway, I had been living, I'd been trying things out and understanding my need for God and my inability to live in a religious way, that you're just not going to get there. It's just going to be continual failure. So that all made sense to me, but because of the community I was in with that type of faith community, I didn't know how to cope with that. I couldn't say, "Oh, I want a relationship with God." No one said that. That was just strange talk. So I lived the rest of my teenage and into my young adult life with that. To me, it's got to be one of the worst ways to live, is having the knowledge salvation, the understanding about that, a full, like, spirit, like a deeper than your mind, but really like, wow, I get this. This makes sense to me. Without the understanding of grace, relationship, God's love, all of that. So that was a tough life. But anyway, as a young adult, and I had what I would call more of the Lord part of the relationship, where like, oh wow, I want you to be the driver, or I want you to be the pilot and me to be the or however you want to word it. That happened. Was there a catalyst that led to that shift? Yeah. Why'd you have to ask that? It's kind of embarrassing. It's kind of embarrassing what that catalyst is, but hopefully we can take the mystique out of some of the things and realize that it can be like pretty practical. So I've never been a morning person, quote morning person. I just wake up slowly. I come alive after a certain time at night. So that's just how I was wired, and that's how I
went to bed at 7:00 last night, by the way.
All right, so you have no idea what I'm talking about.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I can feel that, honestly, raising kids, it was like putting them to bed. I could be out, in that 8 o'clock range. I could be gone, but if I go past,
there's a point of no return.
Yeah, you're back on now.
Yeah.
That's changing. It's different now. But anyway, for many years, Sunday morning, especially as a young adult, a teenager, getting into college, that whole thing, the idea of getting up and doing this thing. So honestly, I had moved over to that spiritual culture that my sister was in, that I saw like something's going on here.
Yeah.
So I was spending time in that environment. It's really different, and I don't necessarily recommend that whole thing. There's more details about that. But the point is that it was vibrant in a way that I hadn't experienced. And they, for all of the other things that were, not great, they were experiencing relationship and things like that.
Yeah.
So I started being a part of that. And basically, within my freshman year of college or whatever, I think I might have said out loud to God, I'm going to give this all of it. I'm going to give this my whole go. I'm going to, press into whatever's going on in this church community. I'm going to press into what's happening when the guy's talking about the truth, the Bible, and all that. I'm going to pray. I'm just going to go into this. I'm going to forget about how I feel like a failure and all that. I'm going to just go into this fully. And the reason is, if I come away from some time period of experiment and it's nothing, I'm done with Sunday. I'm not getting up anymore. It was literally about sleep. It was literally about not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately it was about not playing a game. For some reason, my whole life I've been saying, I just want to be real. I just want to be real. I don't know why. I don't know why I craved authenticity at that level. But it's just been something I've been saying deep inside of me my whole life. When someone comes up to me and go, oh, you're just, like last week we played a show down in Spicewood, and someone came up and go, it's so cool, when you play, it's just so authentic. They don't know, like, that's the biggest compliment ever.
That's been one of your life aspirations.
Because somehow I've been trying to do that without meaning to.
Yeah.
So I think this idea about sleep, hey, I'm not doing Sundays anymore if this isn't for real.
Yeah, yeah.
But as it turned out, it was very for real. And side note, at the end of that little experiment, 6 months or so, I was baptized. And the side note of it's not a side note; it's a whole podcast that I'm sure you guys have done or going to do about why is baptism significant. I don't even know. I can't tell you. I mean, we can read about it. We can unpack all of that way.
Yeah.
But the other mystic part of it, of why is it profound, I didn't come out of those waters and go, like, whoa, there it is. But when I looked back, I go, look at how many things started. Look at what occurred after that time. And I don't fully understand what that is, but
there's like a pretty significant symbol of life change, like in that moment.
Yeah, beyond understanding why and what it all is. I just respect it and kind of like, I don't want to necessarily know.
Yeah.
But I have this little special thing every time someone's getting baptized here, like, wow, if you knew, if you could fast forward 5 years and see what's occurring here.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a special time, and so it's a long answer. The point is that there's a culture or a certain sector of people that found out that I was A, a musician, and B, also a follower of Christ. And from there was this pathway that I didn't necessarily chart out or choose.
Yeah.
It was just, I describe it like a river that was roaring at that time.
Yeah.
The needs were so great for some people, for someone to be a musician and a believer. It was just like the needs were tremendous.
Yeah.
There was just a gap.
Yeah.
So my little toe touched that river, and it just went, and I traveled.
It's been going ever since.
Yeah, and fell into traveling for full time for 12 years of that. And the very first place in terms of being on a stage is in terms of doing the hey sing with, that was learned, on the fly, learned on a stage, I'd never seen that.
Yeah.
I'd had no experience with what that was.
Wow.
The only thing I had seen was a guy directing a choir, that kind of thing, as far as church music. So the very first place was, for me, an invitation to come play a song that I had written. So I go and play the song. The guy's like, can you come back and do that again? We meet once a week. It was a group of young people. Can you come back out? It was about 20 miles from where I lived in Dallas at the time. So I drove back out, and eventually he's like, hey, the group likes to do participations. Do you think you can do a song we might recognize? It can be, here's a few to think about. Okay, I'll try it. And that's the beginning of moving into that. And a funny little side note, that was such a crazy group of young people, teenagers. And one of the guys, for those people that follow, I don't follow Christian music in a avid way necessarily from music that I listen to as a songwriter and develop in that way. Sure. But for those that do, they probably know of a group called Shane and Shane. I have a popular group. And so one of the Shanes was in that group as a student.
That's cool.
That was my first, and those guys were offline. They were saying, hey, they would invite me, hey, come to this basement. We all get together and we just light candles and sing these songs about our relationship with God. So that was crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy
cool.
thing, and very organic, very, again, genuine to see like these young people were genuinely inspiring. Yeah.
I wish we had more time to, I want to dive into like every little nuance of what you're saying and just learn more. And it's funny if you're name dropping. I saw you open up for John Foreman one time.
Right.
Who's the lead singer of Switchfoot.
Yeah.
So if you were just
really cool.
to shamelessly name drop, is there any other thing like that you'd be like, oh yeah, I got to be part of this thing or this person or this project?
Yeah, there's a lot of openings, opening for this person, opening for that person, being on a project with these other people. But these days I feel like saying like, yeah, I share a stage with Jacob Hildebrand and
who's our guitar player for those of you who don't know Jacob. He's always on guitar.
Oh yeah, and to say that I record with Fred Manduano, these guys are like world class, and to be like, yeah, we do music with Lex Land, and like stuff like that. It's so much more meaningful.
Sure.
Because after a certain point in the music business, you see what is required, even the stroke of luck, strange thing that happens to household names. Also, it's hard work, but the people I've mentioned, they have their 10,000 hours. They have done that, and they are every bit of, legit and creative and talented as the household name people.
Sure.
Anyway, I'm not trying to avoid your answer, but I'm saying in terms of name dropping, that's my name drop.
Yeah.
Is those people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've done stuff, but it honestly sort of blurs out.
Mm-hmm.
You forget about it because it turns out to not mean much at all.
Yeah.
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 And the people that you walk with daily and can actually have a life with.
Which are the Jacobs and the Lexes and the Freds and.
This is going to keep going forever.
Yeah.
That's why I moved to Austin, was like, this seems like a place that if you have a song, you'll have a place to share it.
Yeah.
No
yeah.
matter.
Well, it is cool. We have a mix of volunteer and contracted musicians at Northpoint. We have for years, and but it's pretty awesome to have a player come in and play with us. 2 or 3 times, and just because of guys like you and Chris Roden and Taylor and Jacob and Eddie. All these players that we have. The word that they always use is family. Like, oh man, this place is like a family. Like, that's amazing. It's so cool. And I love that that's what's been built, Yeah. I love that, God has brought all these individuals to where you can name drop individuals and what they've done and who they've been a part, touring with Jason Mraz and Miranda Lambert, Grammy award winning musicians,
Yeah.
But they're all here to play a couple of songs, to Jesus, and they're all here to act like a family and be a family when they do it. And it's kind of a beautiful, beautiful thing behind the scenes, to watch it all unfold. So, anyways, that's you answered even more than I asked, so that was fantastic. I want to drill in a little bit to some of the content we're talking about in this series. So we're doing this series called You Are Here, and it's a really tough thing to even try to talk about because it's almost like we're trying. You can accidentally put God in a box, and it's not the purpose of the series. Meaning, you can distill faith and spiritual journey down to a couple of steps and go, oh, it's just this, when it really is so much more experiential, and it's things that, you know, God brings us through over our life. It's not just checking boxes, and that's kind of where we're at in the journey of talking about a spiritual kind of pathway, is that moment in faith where, you know, you described, and you kind of, I don't know if you did this on purpose or knowingly did this, but you kind of described the trail markers that we've already been through in this series. So, you know, believing, and then between a rock and a hard place, oh, this life that I live, and now this other one, I don't quite know how these reconcile. And then, okay, I'm going to follow, I'm all in. And then at some point you realize, oh, I thought all in meant I fill my schedule up with all these Jesus things, and then that's it. That's the culmination of the Christian faith. And, you know, going into this last part of the series, the whole point is like, you get on this spiritual treadmill, and all of a sudden you're just doing, and you're never like spending time or in a true way being with God, you know, or being where your feet are, where God has you. And so, you know, your journey has kind of been in some form or fashion those trail markers in a way.
Yeah.
You know, it's weird to kind of quantify it, because it's you look past and you're like, oh yeah, and I can see it in my life too. And then some point you just, you know, a lot of people get discontent with the church and faith and pastors and just the whole thing, you know, because and then it's like, oh, the institution is the problem and all these things, when really they just got discontent with doing, and they desire something more in their life and their heart. They truly want to know God in an intimate way and know Jesus in an intimate way, and that's kind of where we're at. And so, you know, I wanted to ask you, and I know you brought something to share as well, but I want to ask you first before we get to that. How would you describe kind of the difference between doing for God and being with God, and how that's kind of played itself out in your life and your journey?
Well, I'm at a dilemma immediately, because it's sort of like saying, you know the thing that you do organically without breaking down how it happens. Can you break down how it happens? You know, it's kind of like, well, the very essence of moving like that. But I mean, I guess what I'm saying is there's no comfortable and simple answer to that. It's honestly becoming familiar and peaceful with discomfort, something like that, because you're going to keep requiring grace with your spiritual life and with your human relationships. So that's really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But when you can get familiar enough with it that you know that's part of the ebb and flow and movement, and the sort of the movement of life itself, once you become not okay with it, but at least you become familiar enough that that's part of it, now you're moving into a place of like living in an environment of love, and that can move into you and out of you, like freely and naturally more. So I think getting comfortable with those discomforts, those uncomfortable things, getting comfortable with questions. In the last few years, you know, I mean, my life has been intense and stressful with different, the family dynamics that I had with having a terminal sister, which is a profound part in my role in that through my whole life. And then having mental illness has been a part of my family of origin, and it's just been a crazy ride. And then health things, cancers, you know, in my family, and things with my kids, you know, it's been a very intense ride. Uncomfortable, very much. And it's created a lot of questions, to the point that, you know, like when my sister was headed into a triple transplant surgery in her 30s, you know, I realized what struck me was everyone was out in California for this meeting at Stanford, the best place to have this done. And it just overwhelmed me to let everyone know, hey, we should decide about our faith now, you know, before we enter this thing. We should decide where are we with our faith, and wrestle with what if it doesn't go the way we're hoping. you know. So that kind of push of like, you have to make this, you know, you have to decide about the relationship with God. It can't be based on circumstances. I mean, is this relationship real or not? You know, are you going to stand on truths that you can't fully see yet, based on ones that you have experienced, or based on the overwhelming that your soul has been convinced that these truths are for real? Anyway, those challenges with the stresses is my point. You know, recently there was a deal where there was a thing going on with a family member, and it was so critical and so intense that without knowing it, I ended up out in my studio all night, for entire night, just praying for a certain result, praying if there's any way, but knowing that, you know, that those moments can create a lot of tension, a lot of struggle. Why would God allow things that did not go the way I was praying for? It did not work out that way. Those things create a big struggle. Out of that moment, you know, I think I found myself reading Job, because I was like, well, all I know to do is like read someone who just seems to continually get, you know, how did this guy do it, you know, or whatever. And I saw brand new things in that story as I went through that process with him. And what I saw was that in a lot of ways, he actually had a relationship that could carry him. He had that organic relationship with God, but the world, the culture, the greater culture around him was like, no, we got to figure out what's wrong, because if you're having wrong things, it must be something wrong with you.
Yeah.
I guess if he had visited with other people outside of his religious subculture, they probably would have said, no, it's your God. Your God's useless.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, so he would have gotten those two forces. And I mean, I think that's kind of part of it. We've got an overly religious information set that informs our struggle and says, well, you must be doing something wrong. Like karma kind of idea or whatever. And then we've got another culture that's telling us, no, it's just that your God is just an idea in your head, and that doesn't work out when you need it.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of struggle. But I guess in the end, I'm saying that walking in these struggles, facing them, but just realizing that people call a relationship with God, they call it a walk. And if you really if you think about how boring a walk can be, but how spectacular, the things that you can discover on a walk that you never see on a run, or you'll never see on a bicycle, or you'll certainly never see in a car. It's fun to go 100 miles an hour, but sure miss a lot. Walks seem boring to race car drivers maybe, but the discovery is all there. You know, walking on a trail and stopping, and what that's doing for our mind, what that's doing for our life, to discover that way. But it is a walk, and so I think that just keeping your feet moving, keeping going, turns out to be a big part of just the relationship part, and committing to engage that every day. Probably best at the start of a day, with the way our culture's wired with work. I mean, you'll spin and you'll be like, wow, it's been a week. And so engaging the relationship with God every day, regardless of the feeling, and continuing to walk, just a patient walk. And it really, and then there's more to it. I could share more just depending on what other questions you have, but I think we talk a lot in our current culture. Thankfully, we're starting to talk about presence. We're starting to talk about actually being here in this conversation right now, rather than like, I'm already thinking about the list I've got to do as soon as this is over, or whatever, that kind of presence. We're starting to talk about that in the culture at large. There's apps to help you be, meditate and be more present, but I find that that's actually what's happening. That's actually what I'm applying in my relationship with God, is presence. So sometimes I do this crazy thing. It is really weird to talk about this, but sometimes I'll imagine, what if I was one of the people that got to, we call ourselves followers of Christ. So what if I was one of those people following him around, and then we'd stop, and maybe we're just resting, or maybe we're having lunch, but it's just being in the presence of, and there's not like, let me just give you my list of questions that I have. Or perhaps God himself is speaking, and we're just sort of wondering where he's headed with this. What is he what is he talking about? But I think the biggest thing is the idea of just being with God. So sometimes I'll literally use that visual concept, or that idea, and in the same way that people meditate, or you call it sitting, or just breathing, or whatever it is, in that same way. But I'm sitting there just with God, not really expecting anything. And for me, since I have a way to express musically or through instruments and things like that, often that's my words. I don't want to form a sentence. I literally will pick up an instrument, since they're all around me in the studio hanging, and really just begin pouring out an expression. I'm not playing a song I know. I don't know what I'm playing. It starts with notes. And I would say 80% of the time, after a little while of that, I actually do end up turning on, hitting record, because it does turn into songs, but it's not started that way. It's really just, that's my way of being part of the conversation.
Yeah. Well, I know you brought your guitar with you today, which is unique and cool, because Buck never brings a guitar with him on these podcasts. And so, yeah. But if I gave him permission to do so, he'd probably be like, nice. He'd be so excited. And I know you brought something you shared with us beforehand that was pretty profound, and kind of a symbol of what it means to kind of be with God. And so would you just share with us this song, just a little glimpse into your world in terms of what it looks like for you to connect with God in this way?
Yeah, let's try it.
Cool.
She made it so plain, it gave me all there was to say. No games and no more playing for me. Shadows on the wall.
Man, so good. There's you showed me the lyrics beforehand, but as listening to it, you just get more time to hear how they're sung, and some of the lyrics hit me a little differently. The one about I don't know if you're writing it this way, but God staying up, making us in His image, and what that means. And can you summarize kind of where that song came from for you and how it kind of articulates being with God for you?
Well, I had a friend at the time that would sign off, texts or emails, whatever, light and love. And I was just in a relationship with the person, so I was experiencing a bit of a disconnect between that statement and then how the person was actually flowing and moving. And so I was kind of struggling with how easy it is to say things like peace and like, but really, is that an intention, or is that a benediction of the moment? So anyway, I was kind of wrestling with that and realizing that, yeah, light and love, it is amazing, but it comes from somewhere. It has a root, and it's kind of like Jesus talks about water, living water, like a well that never ends kind of thing. So light and love, being cool to each other, being good to each other, all these concepts, they're great, but what's the well from which that flows so that it's not propped up with a bunch of strength and energy, but it's something renewed continually from a source that actually knows what real light and real love are. So that's kind of what I was wrestling with, saying that light and love came from somewhere. And the Creator stayed up to try every possible means, making a way to get to us, to just have us turn our glance just enough to where we see like the source of that light, and that all we have to be is the moon. All we have to be is a reflection of that. We do not have to go around trying to be the light itself. We just turn our face towards Him frequently enough, continually enough, regularly enough, that we kind of have the reflection. We're like the moon.
Yeah.
We're just reflecting that light. That's kind of where it was coming from. Us, a really great guy in downtown Round Rock said, hey, I know you have kids. At the time, I didn't have a studio. I just had a space in my house, and I was like, hey, let me give you office space. So I went over to see this space he was willing to just give me for 6 months or however long, and I walked in there and had that guitar, actually. I have a lot of them, so it's kind of weird how you can remember where you were with which instrument. But I actually had that one, and I walked into that space, and that's all I had on me. And I sat on the floor, and that song just kind of fell out from that experience. I will say, though, that in the end, my friend who was saying that, I realized it was something so profound that he's looking at a person of faith and saying, yes, that's cool that you understand where it comes from, but can you actually do it? That's cool and all that you obsess about the source of light and all, but are you the moon? But can you be that? Or do you just want to go huddle up with a bunch of people who talk about the source all the time, but they don't know how to be it? So it's kind of full circle for me now, where it's both. I'm saying, yeah, light and love comes from somewhere, and light and love is very important to be that.
Yeah, I think the moon analogy is great. You don't have to be the light, yourself. You're just trying to reflect what's already there, and that's kind of, so much of what you're saying. It feels like the very dichotomy of, okay, we want to stop doing so much, want to be with God more. So what do we do?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying. Like even asking, how do you do this?
Yeah, yeah. But and that's where it truly is. The water, is such a good analogy, because it truly is it's a well that never runs dry, but it's something that God brings you throughout your life. And I think part of this series is based on this book called Mansions of the Heart, and it's like trying to take something just to give people some tools to go like, what does this look like? You know, when I'm 70, what is faith going to mean to me?
Yeah.
And one of the things it talks about is this whole idea of the dark night. This is like dark, not like Batman Dark Knights, but dark nights of the soul. And it's where God places something in front of you, like you were talking about, and it's a moment where you go, oh man, if I really believe all the things I've been saying behind me in my life, I believe, dang, when I face this, it's like, it's going to be really, really difficult. And God puts those like kind of dark nights, and not that, you can get into a whole ordained and all this stuff conversation, but that's not the conversation we're having right now. But God places us in those moments where we, he refines our faith in those moments, and something new comes out of those moments where a new understanding of what it means to be with him comes from those, and so it isn't anything you can do, but it is being, and it's being open to what God has in front of us, each and every moment, each and every day. It was made me think of this morning. I was driving in when the sun was coming up, and I, new baby at home. I'm a pretty like regimented person. I like to have my time with God in the morning and my spot and my coffee. And well, baby don't care about that. And so, and Ashley was up with him, and I didn't want to just leave her doing that. So I was helping this morning a little bit, and so I was driving out of my neighborhood, going like, dang it, I didn't spend time with God. Like my whole day is gonna be like off now. And then I just had a moment where I was like, the sunrise is happening right there. Like this beautiful thing is happening right there. And if I just get caught up in trying to do, I'm going to miss that I'm just sitting with God right here as I'm driving to work, And there was a moment where God kind of like, just punched me in the stomach a little bit and said, hey, you can be with me right now. You don't need to be all religious about it. You can just walk with me. So
that's so much it, as not programming how the relationship is going to occur or develop or deepen, because it could be a lunch. I mean, it's just remaining open to that and remaining hopeful that God is interested in teaching you more, growing you more, pulling you deeper. I've met people that want, and I myself have certainly wanted to freeze a moment. I've wanted to freeze a time when things seem great, enriching. I wish I could just stay in this season of life, this spot right here. I've wanted to freeze that, but I've not met anyone that wants to stop developing and stop growing, stop, evolving and deepening in their character, in their endurance through physical life and through spiritual mental. I just haven't met people that are like, yeah, I'm done. I'm so arrived that I'm done. So everybody wants to continue that path, and as we pray for that to happen, this I've told you when we hang out. Bad news for you as a parent is when you pray, when you finally realize the development you want for your kid, and you're sort of praying along those lines, the spiritual and emotional character development of this person that you care so much for. You're actually, not to be hurtful to those of us that have been through car wrecks, but we're kind of praying for a car accident of some kind. We're actually praying for struggle, because if we're honest, the only way the growth that you want for this person is going to occur is through struggle. So as we say, I want to grow deeper in my relationship with God, you got to know you're asking for challenge, because the things that grow us, no one would ever go sign up for that willingly. Like, oh, I want to go through something awful and have others not understand me and have to be alone for a while, or or whatever it may cause, physical, mental, emotional struggle. No one willingly says, you know what I want? We have another crafty way that we think growth is going to happen. It's going to be not very painful. It's going to involve a lot of things we like, or whatever it is. But when we get to the other side of struggle, we see how much that's now a well that's never running dry. That's going to pay us back the rest of our lives with how we relate to people and how we know ourselves, etc. But we just if we saw it, if we were told in advance, we would be like, no, pass. There's got to be a better way to experience growth. So as we talk about what you just mentioned happened to you this morning of pausing and going, you know what, I was going to read this thing in the Bible and I was going to listen to this deal and I was going to journal this and that. Instead, you sit in front of a sunrise and just are overwhelmed. That same attitude of like, who knows where it's coming from, that's what I mean about becoming comfortable with discomfort is part of getting out of the works treadmill, becoming comfortable with that struggle, knowing that this is the very thing I'm praying for, and God is a careful conductor of that peace.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go through it, and I'm going to make it. It doesn't feel that way when you're in it, but
Yeah.
I mean, I know you and I and our talks, I mean, things that even you've been through, and no one would sign up for this stuff, you know, but the way that now that is going to inform, you know, that powerfully inform, not subtly, but powerfully inform the rest of your days on the planet.
Yeah.
But you never in a million years would sign up for the things that we go through.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. What to wrap up our time, if somebody's listening and they're like, Jayme, I'm on that spiritual treadmill, you know, what would you say to them? I mean, you already said a lot of great stuff, but if you were to kind of wrap it up and say something, you know, to them and they're frustrated and they want more of God, what would you say?
I think first and foremost, I would say don't blow off if you are listening or somehow someone's passed this to you or whatever the case. One, I am such a believer in, not a believer, I mean, I'm such a fan or whatever you want to say of understanding a moment that this is your opportunity to now be part of change. What's happened by you, by a person discovering this topic, is that they're getting that sort of warning that a train is coming. And now is your chance. So you get to now be part of the change, but what's not up for discussion is if change is coming. So if a person doesn't heed this and say like, gosh, I've got to go further, I've got to get out of this get off this treadmill, then what's coming is a crash. You know, if you're going to fall off of the treadmill, I mean, you know.
Walk away from faith and...
It's going to be some kind of rough thing. So this is a warning sign. This is to be, you know, taken seriously, that it is time to press in and find out what's... I mean, that's number one. That's what I would say to a person that... And then after that, I think... So I guess I would say don't relax, and then I would follow that with relax.
Mm-hmm.
Realize that this has been going on long before us, and this will always go on this way of having a relationship with God. So relax and go on a walk, and start a walk. Like maybe what happened to you this morning with the sunrise, same thing. Go on a walk, a slow walk today, or whenever after you've heard this, whether you have to bundle up or... You know, it's Texas, so no matter what month it is.
Somebody's listening to this in the winter storm, and they're like, what?
Yeah, either bundle up or whatever it takes to go on a walk and think about the discovery in a slow walk. And I would just, again, whatever way we can say, you don't want to befriend struggle. You don't want to become buddies with it. But I discovered in coming to Austin to play music, I discovered this profound thing that, again, probably was already in a book somewhere if I was just a better reader. But I discovered that disappointment is directly proportional to expectations. When we expected that everyone that said was coming to our show was coming, that was just not appropriate reality. We had to learn. So it doesn't mean be Eeyore and expect that everything's always going to be bad, but to some degree calculate possible reality. And in that way, I'm saying calculate that struggle is part of human existence, and struggle is also the way that we grow. People in fitness know you have to stretch the muscle to the point of pain for it to come back stronger.
Yeah.
All those analogies, but the point is to basically expect struggle in that way of like this. I don't have to become friends with it, but I can become friends with the fact that this is the way life is, and now I'm in a relationship with God through it and in it, and nothing, and you can make a definitive line in the sand, whatever you want to call that, drive a nail, build an altar, whatever, mark this moment. This is how I'll live my life. I'm going to live my life with God, and then you just begin this nice, patient walk, and all the other stuff is somewhat expected, and it doesn't mean that there aren't giant victories, and it doesn't mean to not set big goals and to expect success or all these type of things. It doesn't mean that, but anyone who's ever chased that stuff as thinking that's the arrival, they'll tell you straight away, like, there's no arrival. It's just a different flavor of struggle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Why, as you talk about the struggle, why is it worth it in your mind, and you think about all the things you've been through and being with God through all those, as you've made peace with struggle and hardship, why was it worth it to you in your faith journey?
Well, because I think that we come from something. We originate from a place that is full of colors that our eyes don't naturally see. And I think I'm using that as an analogy, not literal. I think the place we come from, we will always want that home. We'll want to see in those colors. And every time you come through a struggle, you see more of those colors. Mm. You see more of where you came from. And there's nothing as gratifying for a soul that is both light and flesh. There's nothing more gratifying than growing closer to, seeing more of who you are, what you came from, what you belong to. That's an eternal story. How you're part of that. So, I know that may sound so mystical, but I mean it literally, that it broadens you in a way that connects you to home. So I think that's what's like, it's why people sign up for another tattoo or something, why they do something so painful and do it again. Because they're like, well, it was great. You'll probably go through that with kids,
Yeah.
You'll hit a phase where like, okay, that's it. And then somehow you'll be like, let's go again.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just saying that struggle shows you if you can embrace the fact that the very thing that you want comes in a very boring day-to-day way. You do not have to go look for adventure. It's coming. You're going to have adventure. So just go through that walk, and then you come to the other side of it, and you're like you're seeing every relationship, every conversation has color all around it that it didn't have before.
Yeah. Man, to wrap up, would you just pray for people who are listening, watching, whether they're watching a year from now or, this week, whatever, but you just pray for them and their walk with God and just being with God?
For sure.
Cool.
God, we come to you not by our strength, but by you pursuing us and coming toward us. We admit that we have a design and we're always working on our plan. We admit that, and we admit that it's messy to collaborate, to let go of our plan, or to allow you to be in charge of that plan. Wherever anybody listening or watching, wherever we are, we loosen up our tight, white-knuckled grip on those plans. We loosen it up, and we just want to go on a walk with you. Just a slow, patient walk, and commit that walk is going to continue forever. We're going to live our lives this way, just walking and reflecting your light. I pray for people who have so many voices in their head, so many voices from family of origin, so many voices from culture, the various subcultures they're part of. I pray that pieces of truth would resonate and stick, and the rest would just burn away naturally. I pray that truth would come alive for them, and you would send either people or other confirmations that are undeniable and unmistakable. And I pray this in a way of trusting your promise that we can ask you for anything. And the reason that we can pray this way is because of grace through a Savior, Jesus. So it's in Jesus' name that we ask for these things. Amen.
Amen. Thanks for being on the podcast, Jayme.
For sure.